Hey everyone, today we're going to be talking about through-zero frequency modulation. Now this can be a little bit of a confusing topic, so I hope that I can illustrate it for you in a way that's crystal clear. We're going to do a complete overview of it using an oscilloscope so you can see what it actually looks like. I've also got a bunch of patch examples that I'm going to use to show you. We're going to start off with doing some percussive metallic hits. Then after that, we'll go to the low end and do some percussive hits for like kick drums and things like that. Then I'll show you some searing lead lines and gritty bass lines. And lastly, FM is great for creating evolving pads and drones. I'm going to walk you through all of those patches from scratch and show you exactly what's going on so you can recreate them. For the examples today, I'm going to be using this module. It's the Bond from B-Art Instruments. They're new on the scene from Poland. They've got a bunch of interesting modules, but I'm starting with this one. They sent it to me for free to demo for you. And rather than just doing a module overview and showing where all the patch points do and everything, I was really inspired to make this video about Through-Zero FM. Because you can, of course, make this with any module, but I think the Bond had this design in mind when they were creating it, and it just lends itself to this particular purpose very, very, very well. A quick overview of why I like it. It's all analog, it's a dual oscillator, so that gives you the ability to self-patch it. Each VCO also has 5 simultaneous outputs. There's also 2 expanders that can be used as VCAs and mixers for the different outputs. So it gives you ultimate flexibility with creating waveforms and also, as I said before, self-patching. So I'll make sure to put a link to B-Art Instruments in the description. Make sure to check them out. We'll start with the overview of Through-Zero Frequency Modulation, and then we'll get into the patch examples. All right, let's get into it. Let's start off with a brief explanation of what Through-Zero Frequency Modulation is. And to do that, I'm going to give you a visual illustration using an oscilloscope. So let's take a saw wave and we'll plug it into our oscilloscope. This is what it sounds like. Pretty straightforward. As we turn the frequency up, things get shorter. So now to modulate this, I'm going to use a steady voltage so that way I can show you as it crosses through zero what happens to the waveform. And to do that, I'm going to use an attenuverter and offset module. It's up here. It's also by B-Art Instruments. And I'm going to plug that into number 2. So this is the blue line. And now I have complete control over that blue line and how much voltage is actually going in. And then we'll take that, and right here is where you plug into the Bond module, where it says mod. There's a switch where you can turn from phase modulation to frequency modulation. So as we turn it to frequency modulation, now I'm modulating the frequency of the module. So if I plug it in so you can hear it, that was in the positive range, and you could hear that the frequency went up and down. Now here's the thing is with through-zero frequency modulation, you can modulate in the other direction. And what will happen is that the waveform will actually flip over and give a mirror image of itself. It gives a much smoother sound than if it didn't have through-zero capabilities, where it would hit 0, or as it went to the negative range, it would stop the modulation. It could sound a little bit harsher. But that's it. A lot of people get confused by it, but it's really quite simple. If we take something like an LFO, you can see it's just a little bit smoother to have it travel all the way through 0. And things get really interesting when you're modulating this by, rather than using a smooth voltage or just like a slowly steady moving LFO, if you're plugging in something at audio rate. And that's one thing I do like about the Bond, is that because it's a dual oscillator, it gives all these possibilities for self-patching and modulating itself. You could do some of this with just a through-zero oscillator and another oscillator, but that's kind of the intent of this module, is to facilitate that. So if we take something like a sine wave and plug it in, look at what happens. You can see that it makes a really complex waveform. Now, another thing I really like about the Bond for this setting is that through the expanders, it allows you to control how much of this frequency modulation happens. It's really a delicate thing. If you start adding too much, you get this kind of FM splatter. It sounds cool for these like really brash tones, but you'll see as we get into the patching that sometimes it's nice just to have it a little bit more controlled and subtle. And the expanders allow you to have control over the depths of some of your waveform. So right here, if we go from the mix out and I use this triangle wave, you can see that I can set it to just a little bit, or I can crank it up and go all the way. Let's listen to a little bit of that. So right there, that's just the plain old saw wave, and sometimes it's nice just to add that little bit of harshness, that little bit of abrasiveness, but not have it be full-on FM kind of splattery stuff. So there you go, that's Through-Zero FM modulation. Let's go through some patch ideas with the Bond. So in this first demonstration, we're gonna look at frequency modulation to create percussive, bell-like, metallic tones. So the modules I'm going to use for drums are the Shockmot battering ram for a kick sound and the hex inverter mutant hi-hats. Then the rest is just going to be coming from the Bond. So first, let's get our drums hooked up. I've got it set up to a sequencer. Let's get these drum modules into one channel. So I'm going to send them into the Unity mixer, also from B-Art. It's a 2 HP. This is number 3 in their utilities line. And then we'll also do that with the open and closed hi-hat from the hex inverter mutant hi-hats. And then finally, I'll send that out to my mixer. This is what it sounds like. Pretty straightforward, nothing fancy, because we want the emphasis to really be on that FM metallic tones. All right, so let's put together a quick patch. It's going to be very similar to the Through-Zero FM demonstration, but we're going to also send it through a VCA, also by B-Art Instruments, right up here, and we're going to use an envelope from Quadrax. I'm actually going to use the expander of the Bond to create my waveform, because you can use it to mix together all the different outputs. So for instance, right here you can see that I have my saw wave, but if I would just wanted to make it a little bit interesting, more interesting, we can mix in the triangle wave, or even have it get a little bit funky and mix in a bit of the pulse wave. Let's just start off with something like that. So we're going to use this VCA. It's number 1 from the utilities line of B-Art Instruments. And I'll go into the out right there. I'll plug the gate from my sequencer into the trigger of Quadrax. And we'll go up from Quadrax to the CV control of the VCA. This is just a simple rise and decay. The attack is all the way super short, and the decay is very slight, but we're going to modulate that and adjust that as we go. And then I can go ahead and send the output of the signal, the audio signal, into the VCA. So now let's go ahead and add in some pitch into the oscillator. This is what it sounds like. Pretty straightforward, but now let's go ahead and use that FM to create some really cool tones. So for this, I'm going to use the expander on the right-hand side. You have pulse wave, saw wave, and triangle wave that's normaled from the oscillator. So those three options are there. You don't have the sine wave, but we have these two auxiliary mixers that we can put it in. So I'm going to go ahead and patch it into auxiliary 1, and now this will control that signal. So you can even send other audio signals from outside the module into this using those two auxiliary controllers. So let's go from mix and we'll send it in here. And now you'll notice that since I'm on auxiliary 1, as I turn this up, we can see that sine wave. So as I explained before, we can control the amount of FM we give it through this knob. I'm going to take that signal and send it back into the bond by plugging in here and going into our mod input. So now as I crank this up, you can start to see it starts wiggling a little bit and getting a little bit crazy. Let's hear what that sounds like. So you see, as I go all the way up, it turns into this crazy experimental thing. If that's what you're going for, that's cool. But let's see what happens if we turn it down a little bit, where you can see it just kind of wiggling around a little bit. And I'm going to tighten up the envelope as well. And now I'm going to also raise the pitch of the carrier signal. Pretty cool. Now, one of the great things about this expander too is that you can modulate the amount of FM that goes in using this CV input. So I'm going to take an LFO, and this is a slow moving LFO. I'm going to use another utility from BArt. This was the one that I used for the demonstration to create the steady voltage. This is an attenuverter and offset generator. This is number 9 in their utility modules. But I'm going to use this to kind of control this LFO and not have it, create this knob going all kinds of different places, but just really be kind of subtle. And you'll notice, you see the LFO increases, the FM goes up just a slight bit. Let's actually turn it up a little bit more. And that's probably the max, and then it'll go back down again. So let's listen to that. Pretty cool stuff. And then I really like to modulate the decay for these percussive patches. So we're going to do that. I'm going to send in another LFO into the decay of the quadrack. Very cool stuff. And you could just mess with the amount of decay and everything like that, but it just creates these really cool bell-like tones, metallic hits. I'm going to play around with how much frequency modulation we give it and see if we can get some more experimental sounds. Pretty cool stuff. It also sounds kind of neat if you send in the CV to like a slew limiter. So I'm going to use the B-Art Befuddle here. And let's see what that sounds like. Okay, so there were some great examples with making high pitch sounds and metallic sounds using FM, but it's also great for making low end kick drums, things like that. I'm going to show you how to make some really killer kind of techno-y kick drum sounds and lower percussion sounds using the Bond and using Through-Zero FM. So up top here, I've already got patched up. I'm just going to be using the mutant hi-hats. And then right there is the hex inverter mutant snare. The hi-hats are just going into this multiple, and then I have both of them going out into my mixer. So this is what that is. Pretty straightforward. Let's add in some killer kick drums. So there's, of course, all kinds of different ways you could make a kick drum sound. This is just how I like to do it. This is the trigger from my sequencer, and I'm going to multiply that and send it to 3 different envelopes. I'm going to use number 5 on B-Art's utilities line. That's just a multiple, and we'll send that down to quadrack. So now I've got 3. These gray chords here are all just multiples of the trigger from my sequencer that are going down into quadraks and triggering these 3 envelopes. So those 3 envelopes, what I'm going to use them for are, the first one is going to be triggering a VCA. The second one's going to be triggering a CV to make the pitch of the Bond kind of jump up every time it hits a trigger. And then the last one I'm going to send to the cutoff of a filter. For the VCA, I'm going to go ahead and use this module. This is another one from B-Art Instruments. This is the Balance. And this is a VCA and a attenuverter. It has all kinds of different functionality. I'll probably go over it in a separate video at some point. But for right now, we're just going to be using the VCA and the attenuverter. So I want to take that first trigger out and we'll plug it into the CV of the VCA. And then we got to get a signal from the Bond over there. So I'm going to why don't we take the mix out of channel 2. Out of the second oscillator. Now I can control what sounds come out of it, or what waveform I'm using, and I'll put that in the in, and then we'll go ahead and plug our signal. For now, we'll just send it right in there. So if I turn this up, there you go. Now since I want to use that sine wave, and again the expander doesn't have the sine wave in the mixer, I'm going to take the sine wave and put it into my auxiliary 1. So now I can have a sine wave. That low grumble. All right, so let's just go ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and trigger just this part. That's it. That's all I got going on right now. Let's take that second trigger, or the second envelope right here, and we'll plug it into the CV of the second oscillator. So now it's going to be bumping up every single time it triggers. I'm going to set it a little bit quicker. The decay is going to be a little bit quicker than the VCA one. Now you can hear that is way too much, so we got to tame it a little bit, and that's where we want to use an attenuverter. So I'm going to plug out of here and we'll go into this. It's just a simple attenuverter, and we'll come out of here and then go into the CV. Now listen to it. So right there we have a kick drum sound. And you could, of course, that's just the sine wave. If we want to mix in a little bit of grit, we can mix in some of our other waves. And of course you can play with the tone a little bit. Let's actually lower it. I actually want a nice clean sine wave for this one because now we're going to add some grit using the other side of Bond to add some FM. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and use the mix out just so we can control how much FM it gets and what waveforms. And we'll plug that into the mod right there. And now let's listen to it. So you can get some really great tones and of course, endless sound design possibilities. Let's throw it into the filter. So I'm gonna come out of here and plug it into a filter. This is Make Noise's Q Path, but it doesn't really matter what filter you use. And I really just like not having too much modulation going to the filter. Certainly the resonance, I mean, I put it down, but it's all about sound design and choice. So let's listen to that just to take off some of the edge at the top. You can get kind of those laser beam kind of sounds if you turn up the resonance. And then of course, one of the greatest things about FM kicks is to get this kind of squelchy, distorted tones. So I'm gonna play around with that just so you can see the range of sounds you can get from this. You can also use the right side of the bond to modulate, provide FM to the left side and create this kind of FM loop type thing. Cool. So you can see that there's a lot of possibilities for different kind of percussive elements. Let's check out something else. Okay, so before we get to the evolving drones, which I'm really excited to show you, I want to show you one other feature in the bond that I think makes it really useful for lead lines and just like bass lines and things like that. So I've already got a patch hooked up. Up here, there's some basic drums that are kind of being mixed in. And then I'm actually using both sides of the bond and I'm mixing them together and then sending them through a filter. This switch right here is link, and when you turn it down, what happens is it takes the tuning of the second oscillator and locks it into the first oscillator. So that means if you want them playing in unison or you want them playing melodies and things like that, you don't have to mess around with tuning them. You can just simply click that down and they're linked together. Now, what's great about it is that you can also give them separate CVs so that they can run independently. So for instance, this is what I've got going on for the first oscillator. And then the second oscillator, which is mixed into the same channel, sounds like this. And that's just because I have two different sequences running to it. But if I were to click this up, they'd be out of tune. So it just locks it in together. And now when I play them together, it's this nice harmonizing line. Listen to how it sounds out of tune when I click the link up. Which I guess actually you could even use as a performance trick if you wanted to. But that just makes it just a little bit easier to go ahead and play together because you don't need to worry about tuning. Now realistically, you could just tune the oscillator separately and you'd be fine. But I think it's nice and I wanted to point it out. The rest of this patch, just so we can play around with it a little bit, is I have FM going from the mixes out of the expanders. Again, cross FM, cross frequency modulation. This one's going to this oscillator, this one's going to this oscillator. So what you were hearing before was just the straight signals. Let's turn up the FMs and see what kind of cool sounds we can make. And I'm going to actually crank on a filter a little bit just to kind of take some of that harshness off the end, but you can make some really great rumbling bass line. then of course, as you're playing that, you can go right back to that original harmony. When you turn off the frequency modulation, it really shines out again. So there you go. You could do some awesome stuff with this. But let's jump into the final example and what I'm really excited for, creating evolving drones. Let's patch up a very cool drone. And I've added one module to the rack, and that's the Make Noise Bruja. It's always nice to add some effects like some reverb and delay to drones, so we're going to use that as well. So let's patch this thing up. So first thing, I'm going to mix these signals together using my mixer, the same one that I was using for the drum modules earlier. And I'm going to go from the mix out on the left expander in, and then we'll go from the mix out on the right expander in. So now we're just sending our signals together, and then I'll send those over to the Bruja. And just because this cord can't reach my mixer, I'm going to send the Bruja out single back into this mixer. And there we go. That's our starting point. What I want to do is have them be modulating each other and going into all kinds of different directions. So let's go ahead and send, let's first have them be modulating each other. So we're going to have the sine wave modulate this oscillator, and the other sine wave of this oscillator modulate that one. So now there's this kind of like FM modulation loop. Pretty cool stuff. Let's actually mix that up a little bit. That's awesome. And then what we can do is use a bunch of slow moving LFOs to be shaping these different tones. Let's try that. So we'll just send a few into the CVs here. Let's try this. All right, and let's go ahead and listen to what that sounds like. There we go. That's pretty balanced. And you know what? I'm gonna send in another LFO. This is way off the screen, but it's from Math. So let's just send in a kind of slow moving oscillator into the pulse width modulation and hear what that sounds like. That sounds great. Let's see if we can create a little bit of vibrato, and I'm going to send in another very slow moving LFO into one of the CVs here. And let's make it very, 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 very subtle. That does not sound subtle, but I'm sending in barely anything from that LFO into that CV. But you can hear how it creates these kind of slow moving textures. And let's start adding in a little bit of the bruisia. Cool stuff. I'm going to turn some of the octaves a little bit lower so you can get some really gut-wrenching. So there you have it. That's Through-Zero Frequency Modulation. That's the Bond by B-Art Instruments. I hope you got something out of this video. This, of course, is not expansive. There's tons of uses for FM, and I hope this video inspires you to go out and explore them. If you want to support this channel, check out the Patreon link. There's also affiliate links. No matter what, just make sure that you like and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.